Tanse. Welcome to another broadcast of the First Nations Health Managers Association virtual town hall on the COVID-19 pandemic, acknowledging that I am broadcasting today from the city of Toronto, and I acknowledge that this is the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Thank you so much for coming to listen to this broadcast, watching on all of the platforms that we have. Special tanse to NCI radio listeners as well. And thank you so much, everyone, for welcoming us into your territories, your homes, your offices, your workplaces, wherever you are today. We thank you so much for being with us. Another thank you goes out to the team at Indigenous Health Today, who without them, we couldn't make this possible every week, getting the right information to the right people at the right time. So a huge thank you to John, Stella, Chris, Pascal, merci beaucoup for parler en français, the broadcast. We appreciate that as well. And of course, without further ado, we have a lot of information to share this week with you. We have back Dr. Tom Wong from Indigenous Services Canada. We have the amazing superstar ladies, Carol Hopkins, Dr. Brenda Ristool from Thunderbird Partnership Foundation and First Peoples Wellness Circle, both valued partners of the First Nations Health Managers Association. So let's get to it, shall we? We're going to get an update as per every week from our partners over at Indigenous Services Canada. Dr. Tom Wong, thank you for being with us once again. And we really heartfully appreciate all of the efforts and commitment you are providing a true public service. Thank you, Dr. Wong, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Marian, and thank you for inviting me. It's such an honor to be invited. First of all, I want to acknowledge that today I'm on the unceded territories of the Algonquin people. As of October 21st, 1,100 First Nation community cases have been reported. That's an increase of 33 reported cases from the day before. This compares to over 200,000 cases reported in Canada and over 2,200 cases reported in a 24-hour period alone in Canada in the general Canadian.
All right. So we had a slight disconnection from Dr. Wong. Dr. Wong, I see you back on camera, and it looks like you're muted. So we'll get you unmuted so you can continue where you left off. I see you're unmuted now. And you were just, before we lost you, you were telling us that we have 1,100 cases in First Nations. Back to you, Dr. Wong.
There's been 1,100 First Nation community cases being reported thus far, an increase of 33 reported cases from the day before. And this compares to over 200,000 cases reported in Canada and over 2,200 cases reported in Canada in a 24-hour period alone. For the First Nation communities, 763 cases have recovered. Now, with 322 active cases in First Nations communities, this is triple the peak number of active cases back in spring. This compares to over 22,000 active cases in Canada currently. Of the First Nations cases on reserve, 72 cases, or 7% of reported cases, have been hospitalized. And there have been, sadly, 15 fatalities, with a case fatality rate of 1.4%. That is 1/3 that of Canada's case fatality rate. Currently, Canada has close to 10,000 fatalities in the country. Thus far, There have been no reported cases among residents living in Nunavut and Nunatsiavut. In recent weeks, we have witnessed an alarming rise in COVID cases in the general Canadian population, as well as in some First Nations communities, related to large crowds without physical distancing and without masks. And this calls for our renewed efforts across the country to stay away from crowds and to wear masks to protect our elders, our children, and ourselves. If we are sick or have been asked to self-isolate, do not go out, do not go to work, and do not go to school. Miigwech, Nakumik, and Marcy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the update, Dr. Wong. And I'm like everybody else, we're all concerned about ensuring the safety and wellness of our respective nations, our knowledge holders, wisdom keepers, elders, traditional teachers, everyone. And it's quite alarming to hear numbers like that in terms of having 1,100 now. But nonetheless, we thank you. And that is a great reminder for people. We have to be diligent and remember that this is not a sprint, it is a marathon that we're in. We need to continue to ensure that we are protecting ourselves and others through the wearing of masks, staying socially isolated when sick, and of course, using technology platforms like this when we need to share information and feel connected. With numbers like that, this is taking a toll. It's taking a toll on our nations, on our individuals, on our health leaders who have been tireless in their efforts since this whole pandemic and unprecedented time has begun back in March. And on the note of mental wellness, taking a look at addictions and keeping our spirit safe. And I would like to now turn over to Carol Hopkins. Carol Hopkins, an inspiring leader, a mentor, a trailblazer. Uh, Carol, you are the executive director of the Thunderbird Partnership Foundation. Join now to share with us your messages from Thunderbird. Welcome, Carol.
Miigwech, Marian, and thank you, Dr. Wong. Muy buena bojo, nindaway maganadok no jam indigenous cause gaye maing ganadodem, lane lanape kwe and dow, made wana kwe and dow, lanape king and donjaba. So I'm Carol Hopkins, as Marian said. I'm the director of the Thunderbird Partnership Foundation. We're a national organization with a mandate to support First Nations across the country in addressing substance use issues and promoting wellness, our mental wellness. Our work is also in the frameworks tells us that culture is the foundation. And so I want to use that theme to convey a message to you. And it's hopefully a message of encouragement and inspiration. Last spring, I was saying to you that our ancestors have left a track on the earth for us. They've left their tracks on the earth for us to find our way, to help us to find our way. And in this time, I was thinking, where is the focus of my discussion today? What I need to say to you. And in this pandemic time, we're all concerned about our mental wellness. We're concerned about isolation and distance and depression and anxiety. And many of us, live with depression and anxiety every day. So we don't really recognize it as such until we're in this pandemic time and we notice things are starting to change. They're starting to change a little bit and we're wondering, what is that? Well, we have lots of stories in our history as people on this earth about how change was experienced the same way. We lived a good life, and when change started to come, it was so subtle that we didn't hardly even noticed it until it built up and it got built up and it built up over time. And then there was a response from the people on what do we do about that. So I'm thinking about this time that we're in. You know, it's Halloween time. All over the media, there's all kinds of news stories about go trick-or-treating, don't go trick-or-treating, you know, stay safe. Do you go here? How do you do it? Do you wear your mask over top of your Halloween, you know, mask? You've got a Halloween mask on, and then you put this one on top, and, you know, parents, you know, staying with their children to stop them from running ahead and, you know, intermingling with other family and family bubbles. That's all of our thinking today, because we want to find happiness. We want to find a way to celebrate and to connect and still be part of our community. That's important, to be connected, to be part of a community, but it's also critically important that we stay safe in doing that. So of course, we don't want to be trick-or-treating in areas where there's, you know, high rates of COVID, as Dr. Wong shared with us, that we have a better situation amongst First Nations, and we want to keep it that way. So from a cultural lens, you know, what is the cultural lens to understanding this time we're in? And it's a time where we remember our ancestors. And so in our creation stories, because there are a number of creation stories that go across the cultures of First Nations people of this land, our stories of creation are defined by our languages, by our connection to the earth, and have transcend generation after generation. And so we often think about intergenerational trauma with Indigenous people, and we talk about that a lot because it's a real experience. But we also need to talk about the intergenerational transmission of our truth, of our worldview, our way of life. And that is our ancestors. They had a strong foundation for retaining knowledge, great memories. They had markers of time that in their experiences and their roles and responsibilities that ensured the retention of knowledge, and the truth of that knowledge could be shared with the next generation. So in this time of the year specifically, we think about our ancestors and our loved ones who have gone on. And, you know, a lot of us have experienced grief that we've never had an opportunity to take care of. And, you know, earlier in the spring, there was lots of conversation about what do we do to support people in funerals and in addressing grief. Well, for many nations of people, they have cultural practices to connect them to their ancestors and to the loved ones who have gone on. And there are time markers for that, such as, you know, you don't try to interact with them for at least a year. And there's a whole teaching about that I'm not going to give over Zoom. But I'm going to remind you that our ancestors left that track, left those tracks, left the path, a pathway for us to follow so that we could find a way to connect with those ancestors, with our loved ones, and benefit from that communication. And so that means that the ancestors have a spirit, and their spirit lives forever. That's a principal truth in all creation stories. And even though there might be different ways of telling creation stories across the different languages, across the different lands that we call Canada, all stories are true. And so it's not our way to debate, well, you know, in the Sioux communities, they do it this way, and Anishinaabe communities do it that way, and, you know, Squamish people or the Mi'kmaq people. We have different ways of doing things. The how is defined from our languages and our connection to the land. But the consistent truth is that we all have a creation story that says our spirit lives forever. And so we have a way then to interact with those relatives who have gone on. And the reason why we want to do that is not just about our own grief and loss, but it's about ensuring our future. Our relatives lived on this earth at a time when there was clean drinking water, pure water. And they had way to ensure that the water was clean and pure, had ceremonial practices. We know many of our communities are suffering today without clean drinking water. And so we reach back to our ancestors and remember, ask them to help us to think about how do we move forward to make this change. Our ancestors experienced all kinds of racism through colonization and oppression. They have answers for us to get through that experience in this day. And so when I share this with you about connecting with your ancestors, I want you to also remember that you are the connector. You are the present day connector. Your life is valuable, it's vital, and it's critical to our future and to our mental wellness. You need to link back to your ancestors. And if you don't know their names, grandma, grandpa, Mishomis, Nokomis, whatever word you use in your language, that's the word you use. And you talk to them in whatever way you know culturally to do that. In my culture, we would hold some tobacco and I would just talk. Maybe in my living room, I would hold my tobacco and then go put it outside after I was done. Or maybe I would go stand in the bush or in my yard and talk about, we're facing a pandemic. The sickness is come over the world. And we're struggling as Anishinaabe people to find an answer, to preserve our identity, to ensure the continuity of life. I know you also face this, and help me to think about what I need to do. What is my role? What is my responsibility? What can I do to make a difference for the future? Because every single one of you makes a difference for the future in any small way. Wearing the mask, paying attention to how you're trick-or-treating with your children, it all counts. It all makes a significant difference. And you can feel good about yourself because when you offer that prayer, when you do try to connect with your ancestors and gain their advice and their guidance for what we are facing for our future, in that way, you act as the connector, just as they did for us in their experience of all that they're facing, all that we are facing, as they experience those similar things. They too thought about the future. And so that's the teaching of, thinking 7 generations ahead. It's not just thinking, it's acting. What am I going to do to act? And as we do those things, that's vital also for our mental wellness. That ensures our mental wellness. We cannot live without a connection to our ancestors. In fact, when Thunderbird Partnership Foundation had a conversation with Indigenous knowledge keepers, elders, cultural practitioners, and First Nations communities, and we went across the country, and we had an elder listening to others so that they had the ability to understand what was being shared. And we asked the question about, what does our knowledge tell us about how to have mental wellness? And consistently across the country, the connection and the ongoing relationship with our ancestors and our relatives who have gone on was named over and over and over again. We all have different ways of doing the ceremony or facilitating the prayer or the timing of the year perhaps, or how much time we wait to interact with them after they've left this world. But there is consistent truth in the creation stories, in the differences across creation stories. It's so vital for us to have a relationship with them. So I encourage you all, find that special place for yourself. It doesn't matter if you're in the city, whether you're in a reserve community, in a rural environment, maybe you're in a hospital, it doesn't matter. You can have that relationship with your ancestors. You can pray, you can think about them, you can name them, you can talk about what you're facing today and what the help is that you need. So I just want to share that encouragement with you. Do not forget your ancestors. They walked this earth before, they put their tracks on this earth before, they experienced all of life, the fullness of life. all of the great things that we love about living life and all of the challenges that are before us. Ask them to help us in how we engage our allies to make life better for all of Anishinaabe across this land. Chimigwich, I wish you well. You matter, you make a difference, your life is important.
Carol, I'm always in awe of your words, your wisdom, and the passion that you speak with. And it is so obvious that you walk with our relations. And I lift you up, Carol. I really do. And thank you for those messages. Our intergenerational truth. You are a connector as well, Carol. And for that, I am forever grateful for your leadership. If you wish, all of the health leaders, managers, Indigenous Canada, non-Indigenous Canada, who are listening on the radio, who are watching us on social media platforms, I want to remind you that if you have a question for Dr. Wong, Carol, Brenda, myself, please feel free to email it to us. And that email address is fnhma@ihtoday.ca. Again, we'll try to get your question on air at fnhma at ihtoday.ca. I say that a million times. You'd think I wouldn't stumble over that by now. I do want to say hello to the special folks who are watching via APTN News Facebook as well. Greg, Mary, and numerous others. We appreciate your words and your comments, so thank you as well. Over to another leader in Canada with respect to mental wellness. We welcome back from First Peoples Wellness Circle, Dr. Brenda Ristol. Welcome back, Brenda.
Thanks, Mary, and I'm so glad to be back and to all of the great work that First Nations Health Managers Association does to make sure that we are connected, that we are sharing information and supporting each other during these times. And I just say, and I am coming to you from the unceded territory of Nipissing First Nation, where I live, and looking out across the beautiful lake of Lake Nipissing over at my own community of Dokies. I can't not acknowledge Dokies First Nation in my discussions today. I'm really happy to be here, and I was thinking along the same lines as Carol is, we've been here, we've had some conversations before, and what can I add to what I've shared before? And one of the things that I had conversations with folks I was working with, and I said, what is some messages that you think you need to hear now, as things change, where are we at? And they said to me, let's talk about the fact that, we've been here for so long. I think none of us thought in March that we'd still be having the conversations of COVID at this time. But here we are 7 months later. And for the foreseeable future, I think going to be having conversations about COVID. And what has that meant? And when I stopped and thought about that, I thought it's done a couple of things. One, we've had prolonged and constant stress or chronic stress as a result of COVID, whether it's do we wear masks? Do we not wear masks? When do we wear masks? How do we wear them? Social distancing, how do we do our jobs? And how do we do it in different ways? How do we protect our elders and our senior population? How do we protect our children now that they're returning to school? How do we do our jobs from home and still take on other roles? So there's been lots and lots of stress that's occurred and continues to occur in these last I suspect will continue forward. And I think as a result of trying to figure out how to do things differently, including things like being on Zoom and having discussions and conversations and meetings by Zoom, we've all been plagued by fatigue. And that fatigue is Zoom fatigue. I call it COVID fatigue. And I think just general fatigue about not being able to do the things that we previously did, things we enjoyed, things that brought us joy, seeing the people that we wanted to see. So lots of fatigue happening. I think the third thing it's done is it's helped us, or brought to light, the things that heightened a recognition about there's been a lot of impacts to our families, to ourselves, to our communities in the area of wellness and mental wellness as a result of COVID. And we see them in our communities. We hear about increased rates around domestic and family violence, increased issues that be people struggling with their mental health, suicides, increased use of substances, and just maybe generally people not getting along, struggling and having difficulty managing and taking care of their needs. And I think fourth, we've just seen as workers, it's a real challenge about how do we do this? How do we address things that were there before COVID and things that have either cropped up because of COVID or things that have been heightened as a result of COVID? And I think those are four of the things that really strikes me is the struggle that we're having as workers about how do we do this and how do we keep doing this? Is enough? And how do we do more, because things are still in some cases feel like they're in crisis situations. We've lost people to accidental overdoses. We've lost people and not been able to connect with them through grief. And thank you to Carol for talking about some of those things about connecting. And I think, well, what can we expect if we're in ongoing, constant stress? And I think one of the things we can, yes.
Hi, Brenda. I am so sorry. We're talking such great messages about connection. And I'm just noticing that when you move around and you talk with your hands, you're becoming a bit choppy on your audio. And I just want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to hear the amazing advice and wisdom you're sharing with us. So I'm going to turn my video off and send it back to you, Brenda.
Great. Thanks, Marion. I will try not to use my hands. Let's see how that goes. Okay. And so I think when we're talking about what can we expect because of constant stress, one of the things is we can expect that we may find long-term problems for our heart and our blood vessels because constant stress has an impact on our heart and our blood vessels. It causes consistent and ongoing increases in our heart rate. It elevates our levels of stress hormones and our blood pressure and increases things like our risk of hypertension, heart attack, stroke. And for postmenopausal women, it gives us a greater risk of effects of stress to heart disease. So it also affects things like the endocrine system and increased production of our stress hormone called cortisol. And although we are expected to have cortisol when we're under stress, and it's meant to do things like increase our energy and activate our immune system, when we're under chronic stress, it impairs that communication between our immune system and our endocrine system and the brain. And what ends up happening is it can lead to things like chronic fatigue. So when we say, oh, I'm so tired of being on Zoom, I'm so tired of all of these precautions of COVID, it is because we've been flooded not only with information, but our body has been flooded with stress hormones. And so that chronic fatigue is one of the outcomes or results of being under constant ongoing stress. It also leads to metabolic disorders like problems with diabetes if we already have diabetes, or it could push us into diabetes. It also leads to obesity. And it can lead to mood disorders like depression and anxiety. It can create problems with immune disorders, stomach and bowel issues like irritable bowel syndrome. It can impair our gut health and the bacteria in our gut, making it toxic, and affects our brain health. Believe it or not, it affects our brain health and it influences our mood. So we're more likely to be irritable, to be frustrated, to be sad, to be depressed, and to worry, and have more concerns about what's happening around us and to us. It can cause us to eat more. How many of us have found ourselves sitting in front of a television, exhausted, watching Netflix, binging that, and binge eating? So it causes us to eat poorly. And when we're stressed, it can result in really all kinds of digestive health problems, heartburn, acid reflux, gassiness, and bloating. And it can activate our systems, the autonomic, the sympathetic, and the parasympathetic nervous systems. These all affect things like our heart, our blood vessels, our respiration, our breathing, so we're holding our breath or not breathing well, our digestion, and even our reproductive systems. When we think about new moms or expecting moms, those of us who are stressed during this time when we are expecting new life or have given new life, it leads to increased maternal stress as well. And that can have an impact on the fetal and ongoing childhood development when we have too much stress. And it can also disrupt bonding for new moms and new babies. So it can have a lot of really, really difficult problems on our physical health and our emotional and mental health, not only for ourselves, but for our children as well, and those in our lives. And so when I think about those issues, I think, well, what do we need to do about that? And I'm so thankful that Carol gave the message she did. She gave the message about connection. And my first suggestion to you is thinking about our own care, self-care. Make sure that if we want to reduce those impacts to our digestive health, to our mood, to our relationships, to our breathing, to our heart, and all of those things, then we need to take care of ourselves first and foremost. So like Carol said, you're important and you're valuable. And so you need to take care of yourself if you're important and valuable. So are we eating healthy? How many of us made gardens this summer? Make sure that you're taking advantage of all that good food that you harvested out of your gardens. You know, if you've frozen it, make sure you take it out. There's so much nutrients and vitamins in there that helps in battling that constant stress and the stress hormones that are flooding your body each and every day. So eat well, eating lots of good vegetables and fruits, and reducing that junk food, those processed foods, so that we can use that good, healthy food to give us energy, and the energy can allow us to express and get rid of that stress in much better ways. Make sure that we're taking care of our physical health by engaging in physical activity. It's still a really beautiful time of year to get out there and to engage in hikes and walks through the bush, walks through our community, perhaps even going for a run if we like to run. We can time of the year, that those are important to do as well. So a little bit of climbing and foraging, those are all helpful. So getting our hands into the earth and doing physical activity and being connected to the land are really, really important. Make sure that we're involving ourselves in social and emotional supports. So reaching out and talking to people, checking in, making sure to you're okay. So I think about this time of year and how we might be helping our family members who are closing down for the summer. You know, they're closing their gardens, they're putting their things away. So even just moving around and putting things away out of our lawn, putting them in the sheds and in the garages so that they're protected for the winter, going out and helping our parents and our grandparents to do that work gives us an opportunity to connect with them and to engage in physical activity together. And it also allows us to spend time visiting and checking in on each other in social distancing ways if they're not in your bubble. But if they're in your bubble, it also allows you to spend time together in closer range. And so I think making connections is critically important. As workers and in our teams, my question to you is, what are you doing to ensure that you're connecting with each other in your teams? Are you doing check-ins? Are you seeing how each of your team members are doing? You can do that through Zoom. You can do that through Facebook Messenger. You can do that by a text. You can do that by standing at each other's doors if you're back in the work environment, but keeping that social distance, but making sure that you're checking in and saying, how are you doing? What does your work look like? How are things at home? Have you had good rest? So making sure that we're resting and asking people about how they're taking care of themselves. Doing debriefings, because we know that things are still happening in our communities. How did that go for you? How was that community activity that you did online? Was it hard for you when that person called you and had a challenge with their family members who are struggling? How did that make you feel? Do you remember, did you think about yourself? Did you smudge afterwards? So doing check-ins. I think when we're taking care of ourselves, we want to make sure that we're checking in on ourselves and those people around us. I think we should also make sure that as a work team that we're recognizing the contributions of each member of our team. So lifting them up and raising them up. I used my hands, I'm sorry, but making sure we're saying, you did an awesome job, good work, and making sure that we tell them that they're doing the best that they can and that it's making a difference. That's really, really important for our team members. And then I want to ask you, how do you connect with yourself and your spirit? What are you doing? Are you spending time on the land? Are you thinking about all of the teachings? Are you spending time? This is a time for fasting. Are you going on fasting quests at this point in time? Are you spending time connecting to the earth, collecting medicines, putting your hands in the ground and planting for the springtime and getting ready for hibernation? Are you meditating? Are you smudging? Are you spending time in prayer? Are you just looking out, maybe taking those 5 or 10 minutes in your day? And that's going to be my challenge to you. You're so busy and you're in fatigue. I want you to make a commitment to spend over the course of the day in 5 or 10 minute chunks to stop and to engage perhaps in physical activity in those 30 minutes between reflection and physical activity. So get up, stretch, move around, and take some breaks. Go out and walk around your house if you are working from home, or walk around your work building. Make sure that you get in 30 minutes of activity and then come back in, do some nice deep breathing exercises, perhaps using square breathing or diaphragm breathing, and just be a positive energy and breathe and worries, and then let sponge and be grateful. And I'd like you to connect, think about how you work to. I see that I'm having problems, so I'm going to turn off my video on the house. Listen to them and find the sparks of what they are doing well, and help them to see that they are investing in their wellness, even if it is that they are coming in and saying, I'm having a hard time. The fact that they have connected means that they are wanting to invest in their wellness. And so let's find those small sparks of what people are doing well. Are they getting out food to other people? Are they at least checking in? Are they going for a walk? Let's give them those opportunities to see what they're doing well. And then express gratitude. When I think about the fall time, it's a beautiful time with all those beautiful colors. And nature tells us that there's a lot of beauty in change. And the fall is a message about change. So let us rejoice in the fact that we are changing and we are doing things differently, and we're doing them by the best that we can. And I think when I look at the maple tree and the beauty of the maple tree, we remember that the maple tree lets go of all that beauty, and it tells us as well that we have to let go of those things that are no longer serving us, that we no longer need. But when we do that, it benefits us and it benefits all of those things around us. And like the maple tree, when it lets go of its leaves, those leaves nourish all the things around them. And that's also what's happening for us. So I'm asking you to let go. Let go of unrealistic expectations about what you can't, what you should be doing, and what you're supposed to do, and be more realistic. Let go of all of those pains and hurts that you've given yourself. I should be doing more. I'm not doing enough. Things are still really bad. We have to let go and recognize that we're all doing the best that we can in a very unusual time. So let's celebrate the work that we do, because each of you are making a valuable contribution and changing, helping people make change and adjust to the differences that are occurring in their lives right now. So connect, give gratitude, let go of unrealistic expectations, and take care of yourself. And I encourage you to take up my challenge of doing those 30 minutes a day in small 5 or 10-minute chunks to engage in physical activity, emotional wellness, and healthy eating, and just making sure we support each other. And I want you to all know, I think you're doing fantastic work. Keep up that good work. Even when we see our struggles in our community, we know that we are still protecting the people in our community, both from COVID, but also helping them to go through this change together and take care of each other. So miigwech.
Wow, powerful words, Brenda. And I have to tell you both, Carol, Brenda, you are always our favorite guests returning. Our social media is just carrying your words of wisdom, your valued messages about connection, our culture. There are people saying, and if you want to have a say, don't forget to send your messages to us, whether it's a question for today or another time. You can do so by emailing fnhma@ihtoday.ca. Sharon Beaudry Paskaman, we know you are sitting in the Saskatoon ICU with your daughter. The pandemic has hit your family hard, and our thoughts and prayers, the power of connection, just by listening to this radio or this broadcast, I hope you feel the collection of virtual love that is outpouring for you and your daughter during this time for you and your family. And I won't get emotional about it. I just really want to reiterate that this is another reason why we're here to have these town halls, is to share those messages of information, but also the messages of hope. We matter, we belong, we're connected. And so with that, I will go into a balanced approach. We started with Dr. Wong and heard about some of the COVID stats. We went over to Carol and were reminded about our culture. Brenda, you reminded us about our physical self as well. And while we're talking about all of these things, I want to remind everybody that we have an event just for you, where we lift up, hold up all of the frontline workers, everyone who is impacted during this time, but also throughout the year when we're not in a pandemic. By the magic of TV and radio, we're going to play for you a commercial of the FNHMA virtual celebration. Here's our commercial.
Now more than ever is time to thank our health workers. The First Nations Health Managers Association is having a celebration to do just that. Join us on November 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern on ihtoday.ca to thank, honor, and celebrate all health workers and newly certified health managers. It will include powerful guest speakers, moving tributes, and exciting musical guests. So mark your calendars and celebrate with us. For more information and sponsorship opportunities, please go to fnhma.ca.
Thank you for letting us share the message where we are celebrating you. November 4th, as you heard, it is the FNHMA virtual celebration. And I do want to share with you some of the exciting people who are sharing messages with us. Of course, National Chief Perry Bellegarde will be joining us. Hockey player Carey Price wants to lift you all up and celebrate with us. Obviously, Ministers Bennett and Minister Miller have words of hope. We definitely have some amazing musicians. Jeremy Dutcher will be singing your honor song when the newly certified First Nation health managers receive their professional designation. We also want to give thanks to all of our medicine keepers, traditional wisdom holders who will be sending and sharing special prayers across Turtle Island for this day. I am going to go over now to the inbox. As I transition over there, Brenda, you were giving us a challenge to walk, and you did pose a question. What are you doing to stay connected? And I do want to give a shout out to Moonstone Creation in Alberta. This is an amazing store that you have to go to their website. As a team at FNHMA, we were feeling the mental health and the strain of not being together while we all work from home trying to manage a national organization. And so we bought poppy making kits that we were able to be together over Zoom while we broke bread together. So we had deliveries sent to everybody's homes, and we got on that Zoom call and we beaded. We beaded poppies in remembrance of those who walked before us and fought for the rights that we have today. So just a little thing that we were able to do while we were distanced to bring our spirit and our culture back and to feast with one another. All right, so heading over to that inbox, ladies, Dr. Wong, I do have a question, and I think I'm going to put this over to Carol. Carol, we do have Robin from Drift Pile Cree Nation in Alberta who is asking about safe ways to practice ceremony. I know we've chatted about this before in previous town halls. Many people are turning to our traditional methods for strength and wellness. And Robin is observing that people are tending to choose one or another. They're continuing to gather or not. And as a frontline health worker, what's the guidance on how to respectively support our healing ceremonies safely? And maybe Dr. Wong, you'll chime in right after Carol. Thank you.
Yeah, public health measures that promote the safety in this pandemic are not in conflict with ceremonial practices and safety. So I want to say that as the foundation. You know, we had in my own cultural circle of people, which is quite large, goes across the US, Canadian border, and spreads across Canada. There's hundreds of people that gather 4 times a year. We have not been able to gather in this pandemic because we don't want to take the risks to our elders and cultural practitioners, to our children, to our families. And so we haven't traveled across the border. But what we have done is we've had regular Zoom calls where the leadership of those ceremonies have had frequent weekly, bi-weekly conversations about how do we connect with the spirit? How do we continue to practice our culture? And so when we have those discussions and we go back to the relationships in our own areas and bring that conversation forward and then plan. So just as an example of that, one of the things that we did, well, I'll give you 2 examples. And I'm saying this because it's a way of thinking that we can adapt. We don't have to be in conflict. So the adaptation was a smaller group of people, a specific set of people that were in a healing journey. So they were the priority. We wanted to pay attention to them. And so before we got together, we're meeting on land that is governed by First Nations government. So we had to talk to them about our intentions and our desire to host a gathering. We had to limit it. At that time, Ontario was saying 100 people outdoors. And we said, that's not safe for the elders and cultural practitioners and families and children. So we said 50 people would safely fit with social distancing measures, with our masks. Some had the face shields. I always forget that word. They wore the face shields and their mask in the ceremony. People sat in their family bubbles, and we made sure that there was the 6 feet apart for everyone. Our ceremonial lodge, we had the sides of the covers lift up so that there was good airflow. And we had ceremony. We were careful about how we managed food. There was very little food. We encouraged people to bring their own food. But we know that in a cultural practice, feeding the spirit is critical. And so we made sure that we could do that in a safe way, that the food was always covered. When it was offered to the spirit, we wore gloves because then it is offered to the people, but it was small individual portions that were shared with the people. Those were adaptations, and we know we sent out a form to everybody that was going to attend to make sure that they had some consideration. They gave an assessment about, am I feeling this? Am I feeling that symptom? Have I been in contact? All those questions that we want to make sure. So we did screening ahead of time. And then we registered when we got there so that the community would have a list of names. We were accountable to the community. We didn't want to create any concern about safety in that community because we were driving into the community. So that was one example. And another example, again, leaders of the ceremony had conversations, and we decided there was another activity that was critically important to our work and our commitment for how we live our culture. Had another discussion. And we decided that we could share basic information and instructions about what to do. And so this had to do with hanging our clan tie flags. So across nations of people, we have clans that link us to the land. It informs our identity, helps us to understand our roles and responsibilities. So we shared basic information with them and encouraged them. If you have a place where you can hang your clan tie flags with your colors and feel good about that, then do that. If you don't have that space, maybe you're in an urban environment, you don't have a tree in your yard because you live in an apartment building, find a place that you can go to where you can put some tobacco out. Even that matters. It's not qualified by even. It all matters. And so what we did was we coordinated the effort. So in the community where they could do the full ceremony that related to this, there were just the leaders and the helpers. Again, socially distancing, using public health measures. And then it was announced amongst all of the people that wanted to participate, now is the time. And so in our own homes, within our own families, not with a gathering of people in our communities, but just in our homes and our families, we at the same time did something that corresponded with that main ceremony. And the celebration was exciting. I have other stories I could share with you, but it's a message about how do we adapt. Continuing our ceremonial practice is our right, and we have an ongoing responsibility to be accountable for life to the spirit. And so we want to practice that and honor that responsibility as Indigenous people of this land. at the same time, we want to be safe. We want to be careful. And the two are not exclusive. They're not in conflict. We are brilliant people. We can figure out how to adapt. So I offer that up to you. And I understand that part of this question is about, how do I get access to information to even know what to do? Call somebody. Call on the Friendship Center, on the Women's Resource Center, on addictions or maybe substance use services that is offering culturally based services. Connect with somebody in your community and start the conversation. What did our people do when? That's a great question to ask. What did our people do? What did our ancestors do when? My grandson last night told me, he's 14 years old, and he said, Grandma, I really love learning about what our people used to do. He said, because we're doing some of those things now. And that made him feel good. That boosted his self-esteem and his mental wellness. It gave him pride in who he is. And he said, I really miss ceremonies. And I said, I know. We're going to put together a sacred fire. I need your help to put together that sacred fire. And when we put that fire together, you come and put your tobacco in the fire. That will ensure that you have a future where you're going to be passing that on to your children and grandchildren that come in the future. And so I just want to encourage you and thank you for that question. It represents, a critical way of thinking and a central question that comes up over and over again. So thank you for the opportunity to share those words with you. Miigwech.
Thank you again. I swear I'm almost brought to tears. All the time I engage with both of you, so thank you so much. Dr. Wong, we were just hearing about ceremony and culture and being mentally well physically. We've got a 30-minute challenge extended to us. We're asking folks how to share what they're doing within their organizations, nations, etc., on, still maintaining that sense of togetherness. Now, we've heard a lot about how to prevent. Can you go over with us once again on what the symptoms look like so we know what we're watching for, Dr. Wong? That would be extremely helpful.
Thank you very much, Marian, and thank you so much, Carol. You said it so beautifully, about the importance of ceremonies, the importance of going on the land, and Brenda earlier said about the connection, touch the earth, go outside, because culture is foundation, culture is healing, and culture is prevention, and culture is treatment. Amazing examples, beautiful examples that you just shared with us. So thank you for sharing that. All of that can absolutely, be done to uphold everyone in a safe way. So I'm so glad, to be participating today, in this panel discussion. Now, regarding, some of the symptoms, I think that it's so important to actually keep in mind that some people may not have symptoms, even with COVID, and some people may have symptoms, say not today, but a few days later. But some of the symptoms that people may want to actually keep in mind and watch out for, are things like a fever and feeling very tired, and sometimes maybe have cough or have some trouble breathing, and sometimes may have stomach trouble, not wanting to eat, nausea, or vomiting. Those are just some of the, not an exhaustive list, but some of the common symptoms that people may want to actually look out for.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. I really appreciate that. And with that, we will stop there and thank everybody for participating, watching Micmac Maliseet News, The Wolf, Element, NCIFM, Eagle News, Alberta Native News, CGWE, CFWE, CKLB, Co-op Radio, APTN News, and FNHMA, and important importantly, everyone for listening and for watching. Stay tuned for next week. Stay safe. Bye-bye. Hi.